Hello, Orville Nation. Hello, Fatal J, Homer, Anne Marie, the seventh rule. Adega. Well, Adega's both in both places. Hello, everybody. And thanks you guys for joining us today. We have a very, very special guest, but let me first introduce our co-hosts and interview panel. You guys all know Starfleet meteorologist Katie Nicolau.
Hi, guys.
You guys all know science fiction author Dr. Adega. And our very, very special guest today is a well-known sci-fi actor who you guys have seen in all kinds of fan films and original Trek, some of the J.J. Trek films. His name is Ryan T. Husk. He is the host of The Seventh Rule. Thank you, Ryan, for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys. And I recognized a couple names that you shouted out. Quick shout out to Anne Marie and Homer for joining in.
Hello, Anne Marie and Homer. So, Ryan, it's a pleasure to have you here. There is something I want to get out of the way. Well, I don't want to get out of the way. There's something before we begin. I just wanted to express, our thoughts and condolences for your friend Aaron from the Seventh Rule, who played Nog in Deep Space Nine. It's something that we've all thought a lot about here because at some point we had thought we might actually even have him on, and so our thoughts to his friends and his family.
Well, thank you. Two things I want to say about that very quickly is channeling Aaron right now. I can tell you that probably the first thing he would have said is, "I was also core in Voyager."
Yes.
So he was very proud of that, and his performance was great there, and everybody does mention that as if anybody needs reminding of that. But he was very proud of that episode, and it was really cool. Secondarily, he would have loved to come on this show, I think, because he loved independent sci-fi. He loved mainstream sci-fi like the Orville, and he loved talking to people. You guys are good people. I wish he could have come on so that you could have enjoyed his terrible jokes, but his very bright and shining light and how he brought smiles and positivity to everybody.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have him in our thoughts during this interview. So now, I like to start from the beginning a lot of times. And Ryan, why are you involved in acting? What made you become involved in acting? And did you have some other vocation? Is there some other vocation in your life?
Yeah.
Adeg, I'm going to mute you because I'm hearing your fan. Okay.
Yeah, it felt like we were going over train tracks for a second there.
Yeah.
So it was actually relaxing. So how I got into acting was I actually initially moved down to LA from the San Francisco Bay Area, the Silicon Valley to be exact, San Jose. And I moved down to pursue a career in music. And so after I moved down, and I was in Venice at first, and then I went to North Hollywood, and I started taking classes at a local community college. I know this is a long story, but this is how it went. And
please go ahead.
So I took classes at a local community college because it was cheap and fun and easy just to keep the music thing going. Taking singing classes and taking music business classes and whatever else. And one of my classes was canceled, and so somebody in my singing class told me to come and just sit in while I was waiting in her theater class. And I wanted no part of it, but she was stronger than I was, and she just kind of dragged me in, and I thought I could just sit and watch. And once it was like some really weird conspiracy, because then when I came in to sit and watch, then the teacher was like, "You can't watch, you have to participate." I was like, "Okay, I'll participate, I guess. I don't know what I'm doing here." And then she did like an improv exercise, and of course she picks on the new guy first, and I was pretty good at it. It was fun. And so I ended up coming back the next class, and I kept the class instead of the other one that was canceled. And that's just kind of how it all came to be. Very accidental.
Wow. Now I saw that Corin Nemec is a friend of the channel, and I saw you
Oh,
guys
cool.
work together in Renegades.
Hmm.
And how did that all come? How did that whole project? I know you're involved on several levels there, right? You're also behind the scenes. How did that whole project come into being?
Renegades itself. Well, Renegades was the brainchild of Sky Conway, executive producer, who also did Of Gods and Men, and before that, Inalienable. And that was actually my first production job, because I just wanted to be a part of something that had, Walter Koenig and Gary Graham and Tim Russ and just a host of other Star Trek and
Wow.
sci-fi actors, Edward Furlong and Sean Young. It was really cool. So I was like, I'll work whatever it takes. So I volunteered to work for free, um, which was difficult, but I did it for 3 weeks, almost like 2.5, 3 weeks, just because I wanted to be a part of it. And so Corin played Captain Alvarez, and he actually had like a major injury from like a boating accident or something like that. So that's why you don't see him moving very much, because his leg was all messed up or something.
Oh, he was still messed up from the boating accident. Oh, okay.
Right, right. Then after that, maybe 2 years later, Sky wanted to do another one. Sky Conway, executive producer. So he brought a lot of the same people back. At this point, I was a co-producer now, rather than the the bottom of the barrel freebie guy. And Corin came back for that as well. He was injured again. I think he's one of these people, like so many of us, that's injury prone. But he really, as you can see in the performances, he really nails the performances. He comes to work ready to work. He shows up. He's positive. He nails his lines, because a lot of times in independent film, you don't get 15 takes. Sometimes you get 2 or 4 or 5. And so you really got to get it done. That was
Yes.
from Star Trek Renegades, the first one. Tara Page, the blonde lady, and I were rescuing Walter Koenig in that scene. And that's Chekhov, of course. And Tara Page is really cool. She ended up becoming one of my best friends after that. And we cast her in something I was producing called The Assassin's Apprentice. She's the lead in The Assassin's Apprentice. And that was with Marina Sirtis and Bob Picardo. Also Rico Anderson, who will get mad at me if I don't mention him in the same breath. And also, we just finished shooting The Assassin's Apprentice 2, where Tara Page is the lead as well. And we've got Gary Graham in that one, Sean Kenny, who was Christopher Pike in the original series, Armin Shimmerman, who obviously know Quark,
Yeah.
and Gary Graham. Gary Graham, again, who is one of these people where you could give him one take or you could give him 20 takes, and every one of them is going to be great. Like, he just shows up, and it's just not fair, because he shows up and he nails the line, and you're like, damn, he makes it look so easy. It's not fair. So I kind of hate him.
Wow. Diego, have you seen Renegades?
Bits and pieces. It's been a while, but that was something I was going to ask. I mean, you're working near Walter Koenig at the time, and I
Right.
admire a lot of his work, and especially I was a big fan of Babylon 5. When you get, you just said that you hated seeing the guy do it all in consistently one take, doing very well. How does that affect you when you're trying to keep up with someone like that?
Well, to be honest, Gary's a good friend of mine, of course. So I'm hoping he's seeing this, which he's probably not. But he's also like my workout buddy. He lives like a mile from me. So we work out at the local LA Fitness together. I'll just text him and let him know when I'm going to the gym and I see him there. And he's a really cool guy. But to answer your question, I don't know if it's really a negative. I mean, you might kind of look at him and be like, damn, that's not fair that he makes it look so easy. But it also, at least in my experience, it kind of lightens the mood. It kind of makes it fun and encouraging again. You know, kind of how you can, somebody's anxiety kind of affects you sometimes. Like if you meet somebody and they're super nervous, you find yourself kind of getting nervous, you know? And if somebody shows up and they're uplifting and they're laughing, it doesn't matter if you're in the worst mood in the world. If they keep laughing, eventually you're going to start laughing. And so if somebody's performing well and it's not too intense of a scene, you know, it kind of, to me at least, it takes the stress off. And somebody like Gary Graham shows up with a smile. He nails his lines with a smile. He goes home with a smile. And it's really easy to pick up on that and for that to affect you. And also with someone like Walter Koenig, he's in his 80s at this point. And watching him, especially in Renegades the Requiem, he was shockingly good at, like at the end, there's a really poignant scene. And he was so good, you know, because you can't help but wonder, you know, how late in life can we keep acting? And not just that, but how late in life can we keep acting at a high level? And Walter didn't skip a beat. I mean, he's amazing. He's fantastic in his past work, but that's maybe the best thing I've ever seen him do. And he did it as like a 78-year-old or something at that point.
Yeah, I got to meet him at C2E2 in Chicago several weeks ago before everything started getting canceled. And he was with it. Like, it was fantastic. People would ask him questions, he would come right, sharp as a tack. And I'm going to wear this as a badge of honor. I asked him a question he had never been asked before. And it's stupid because it's a common question, I guess. But I asked him what cosplay he would go as if he had to cosplay at a Comic-Con. He's like, I've never had that question before. I'm like, oh, thank you. But no, it's great how just alert and just still active as an actor he is. Because I love his work.
Right. But you know, you have to tell us what his answer was, right?
Yeah. He said Superman. He would probably go like he's one of the original Superman.
That's believable.
Yeah, I could totally see that. Maybe a baseball player for the Yankees or something too. Maybe just yeah. But
well, getting back to what my question, that was great. But my thing is just kind of a compliment to you because
thanks.
I've known people, and when you get around somebody, you can either be intimidated by, and it limits your abilities because you're afraid to live up to what you know you can do. And you know this, I used to be a musician, and you practice to a certain level. You know, you practice, and when you actually get into performance, you're going to perform about 20% of your level. So for you to be able to relax around people who you know do really well and are affected by that in a positive way says an awful lot about you, because I know an awful lot of people it works just the opposite. They become intimidated and stumble and can't work. So that's really awesome.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think on that more interpersonal level and less on a professional level, I think the reason it makes it easy is because these people in particular are so nice and so welcoming and so encouraging. Like someone like Walter, as Katie can attest, is just an abundance of friendliness. Like there isn't a point, okay, I've seen once or twice maybe where where he made me laugh with how he reacted to someone or something. But in general, they're extremely friendly and loving and caring. And like anybody else, they want you to do well. And when you're acting with somebody, you have to have the mentality of teamwork, of not, I'm going to show this person up, like I'm going to do better than this person, because the scene won't work that way. You have to work together. It's like, imagine playing a game of tennis where your intention is to not score a point on each other. You're just trying to pass it back and forth and keep it going as long as you possibly can. And that's more about how acting is that you really want the other person to do well, because the better they do, the better you're going to do. And so they do that. Walter's great with that. You know, it's all in the eyes, it's all in the focus, it's all in just connecting and listening to the other person. And so a lot of it has to do with the person with which you're acting against, if that makes sense.
Well, and I had a question along the same vein. I am starting to realize that I might like acting, and I'm finding also that I'm struggling with remembering lines. Just in general, I have a bad memory. A kickball accident really screwed up with my memory. But do you have any recommendations or suggestions on how to commit lines to memory without sounding like a robot when you spew them back out?
That's another thing that, you know, the professionals are either really good at naturally or have figured out a way to work around. Especially people like in Star Trek or on the Orville, they have to learn these words that have never existed in the English language ever. And they have to pretend like they're just saying, you know, milk and toast or cats and dogs. They have to act like it's a perfectly acceptable and normal colloquialism that they're used to saying all the time. Really, they're talking about technobabble or some made-up Romulan word or whatever. So that part is really difficult. You're not alone in that. Some people have a talent for it. I don't.
I'm in good company then.
Yeah. I think that the best advice I could give is when I first started acting, there was a man named Wizard Elliott with 2 Z's. And he gave like an acting workshop. And he would teach. He was a really weird guy, really weird. But he was a lot of fun. And what he would say is, you got to get your A before you can get your B. And what he meant was, you have to have your first line memorized front and back, you know, up and down, left and right, before you even move to the next one. Some people, I think most people, try to just read the whole thing over and over and over again. They pick it up bit by bit. And his method was, memorize that first line. Say it 1,000 times. Say, I walked the dog yesterday. I walked the dog yesterday. I walked the dog yesterday. And you just keep saying it 1,000,000 times so that you're not even thinking about it. Then you look at what's the next line. And he shit all over the place. And he shit all over the place. And he shit. So I hope we're allowed to cuss in this. Sorry.
Yeah.
and so then you get your A. You finally get your B. And then once you put those together seamlessly, then you move on to the next one. That kind of worked for me, and I hope it works for you.
Yeah, I'm going to give that a shot. I haven't tried that method yet. I'm going to give that a shot. Thank you.
Might work. It's worked for a few people. It's pretty good.
That's interesting. Ryan, obviously we're an Orville-focused channel. We talk about a lot of stuff. We talk a lot about Trek. Have you? I mean, I don't. You might not even be allowed to answer, but have you ever auditioned for the Orville, and do you want to? Would you like to?
I have not auditioned for the Orville. Yeah, I'd like to. I mean, it'd be great. I've only heard good things. I haven't heard any horror stories from the set. I haven't heard any horror stories about Seth. I've only heard good things about him and about the people that work on it. Plus, it's a great fan base. It's a great show. This may sound silly coming from a nerd like myself, but I'm actually proud of how the Orville turned out. Because I think a lot of us were worried that they would focus too much on the jokes and that they themselves would be a bit of a joke because of that. And I remember after the first episode, it was a little too jokey. It was a little too campy. And I remember thinking they need to focus, or even saying they need to focus more on the sci-fi aspect and just let the jokes run themselves. If you create funny and interesting characters and put them in situations, the humor will just kind of write itself. You know, like look at Worf and Data when Data is asking Worf to feed his cat. You know, that just kind of writes itself, right? So they did that, obviously. You know, they probably realized that when they first saw it, and they made those improvements. And I think it's really good. I think they've made a quality sci-fi show that I'd like to see for many years, honestly.
Now, do you think they've found the right formula now in season 2 with regards to balance of the comedic component and drama?
I think they found the right balance on episode 2 of season 1. I think after that first episode, they figured it out. And I think they've honed it and improved on that in season 2. But season 1 was largely good after the very first episode. So I think there's smart people running that show, and they understand what works and what doesn't. And I think if you were to grade them on how well they achieved what they set out to achieve, at this point, it has to be an A. They weren't trying to make, I don't think, this mind-blowing best sci-fi series ever. I think they were trying to make good science fiction stories that you can rewatch over and over again with their own flavor of humor. And sorry, I'm just reading Anne-Marie's comment.
But you know what? You said something so dope, though. And hi, my name is Fatal J. But,
hey, Fatal J.
Hey.
But you said it. They figured it out instead of force feeding the audience what they think they will like. You know what I mean? I think that's a lot of problems with the movies and the TV shows today. They're force feeding us bull crap instead of asking or researching what the fans want. If I'm putting millions of dollars into a TV show or a movie or whatever, I'm going to research what the fans like about certain sci-fi shows. I know it's just me.
That's a good point that you make, and you echo the sentiments of most Orville fans and many of the sci-fi fans that are out there in general. And I don't know much about what's going on with the executives at Fox, but I do know that Seth MacFarlane himself obviously gets it. He's a pro in this industry. He's a smart guy. He's extremely talented. Dennis Koch, shout out to him, immersive acting. He's one of our favorite people. And so I have faith in Seth MacFarlane. And when they first announced the show, I was like, look, Family Guy's a good show. I don't watch it all the time, but it's smart and he understands humor. And that really translates to almost any field. Somebody that can write something, great drama can probably also write decent comedy if they surround themselves with the right writer's room, because they get it. It's about characters. It's about story. And Seth obviously is just a funny guy.
And think about
naturally.
this. You said it. A great comedian is really the best storyteller.
Yeah.
Well, look at someone like Jamie Foxx, right? I mean, he played Ray and he blew us all away. Look at somebody like LeVar Burton, who we thought was an actor, but he could also write books. He can direct, and so we forget that creative people are oftentimes creative in a multitude of ways, not just a trumpet player isn't just a trumpet player. He's also a great gardener, maybe,
My friend, you're exactly right about LeVar Burton, because I was in the shower just 2 hours ago singing.
You can stop right there, buddy. Let's not too far with your shower.
Give it to me.
Hey, just 2 hours ago, I was in the shower singing Reading Rainbow. Shout out to LeVar Burton.
We actually, myself and my co-anchor in the morning show, we were so just everything in the news is depressing. We started singing Butterflies in the Sky. It was great. It was great. I love how that song
is high.
You have a very good voice.
Take a look. It's in a book.
A reading rainbow. I can't sing at all.
I can fly most. Okay, I'm done. PJ is like, I'm ready.
It was starting to hurt a little bit there, buddy. Love you. Let's stop right there.
Let me ask Ryan on this multifaceted comment. Now, I know that you are involved in several aspects of being creative. Which would be your favorite as far as writer, actor, director, producer? Or are they balanced?
It's a kind of a multi-pronged question, and so I'm sorry that I can't narrow it down to one. By far, the most fulfilling by far is writing, because that is, as you guys were singing, you can do anything. When you're writing, you can do anything. When it's a script, you have certain rules and regulations and formulae that you have to follow. When you're writing a book, short story, poem, you can go nuts. You can do whatever. There's literally nothing you can't do. That's the most fulfilling. Acting has been the most fun, just like in the moment fun, than, almost anything. As you can imagine, walking on the bridge of the Enterprise was fun. It was something I didn't think was ever going to happen. Acting with people like Doug Jones in that picture on the bottom right, who is a superstar and one of my best pals. Acting with people like, Walter Koenig or Nichelle Nichols or Tim Russ or all these people, that was a thrill. But also the third one is producing, because producing, it's a little bit less creative and more logistical, but it can be really fulfilling too in its own right, because you are creating jobs. You are helping the market. You're helping the economy. You're helping a screenwriter's dream come true. You're helping an actor's dream come true. You're helping another producer's dream come true. These people that they all have dreams where they want to be an actor. They want their script to get produced. They want to do all these things. And as a producer, you can provide that. And you can provide jobs for 100 people or 10 people or 500 people. And it's a really good feeling.
Ryan, let me ask you, is it more stressful to be in that position of responsibility as a producer?
Not really.
Can it be?
I mean, it can be, absolutely, because you have all the deadlines on your shoulders and, a lot of things that there's a lot of pressure there. But to be honest, I found less stress as a producer than in other professions, because there's something about being in control, as in if you booked the location, if you cast the actors, if you got all the equipment, then when there are these uncertainties that pop up, you have the answers because you did the legwork for the last 2 or 3 months, so you're prepared for it, right? Whereas if you're an actor and something new pops up, well, I don't know. I'm just an actor. What do I know? So there's something very de-stressing and freeing about producing it. It's like where everything is. You know what all the answers are. You don't have to look up to somebody and hope that they can figure it out and just be like, do you know what we're supposed to do? Hopefully, if you're that person, I found it to be much less stressful. I don't mind coming to work, as a producer on set, even if I had 2 hours of sleep, because I know I have all the answers. Whereas as an actor, stressful, man.
Now, this is a guy outside of the Hollywood realm. I've always wondered this. I watch a million movies. I always see it in the credits. What is the difference between executive producer and producer? Because I always see those two.
Money.
Right. Well, this is a kind of a complicated answer. The generic answer, and very true, I'll give you the generic one and a little bit more in depth. The generic answer that is the most true is that it varies from production to production. That's it. There's no hard and fast rule. It's a title. It's just like manager. What does a manager do? Depends on the place. So generally speaking, an executive producer tends to be, in movies, they tend to be a little bit more about finances. They tend to be a little bit more about the higher ups, whereas the producer is the person that is kind of doing the most work oftentimes. Like they're booking the locations, they're hiring the production team, they're doing, all that kind of stuff. They're just making it happen day to day to day to day. They're just doing all the work.
So is the executive producer like the person that invests into the movie, into the film?
Sometimes, yes.
And the producer is the person that's actually doing something to the film.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, but that's always sometimes. Producer, that's always the case, yes. Executive producers, sometimes they're more hands-on. Sometimes they're just offering, they're investing. And sometimes it's just in name only. Sometimes you'll see an executive producer that isn't really doing much with regards to making the film or TV show happen. They're just lending their name by, kind of like their stamp of approval. I'm not going to say, necessarily who does that, but you'll see it in sci-fi a lot. Now, on the other hand, in television, it's a little bit different. Executive producers tend to be writers because they're as responsible for producing this show as anybody else, because they're there all day, every day, writing episodes, creating these characters, working the late hours, as Data would say, igniting the midnight petroleum. And they're just, thanks for the nerd cred right there. And so a lot of times on TV shows and series, executive producers are the writers. If that makes sense.
Oh, I didn't know that. You ever thought about being a writer?
I do it. I dabble. Yeah, it's really fun.
I'm tempted to try and get into it, but I'm kind of nervous. This with anything, because I imagine I'd probably get sucked into it if I tried.
Are you talking screenwriting or story writing?
I've always wanted to write a sequel to the movie Twister. It came out the same year I was born, and they were going to actually make a second one, but then all the disasters happened, and they just thought we're going to stop this.
Just a heads up, Ryan. This lady chases tornadoes for a living, literally. So
yeah, it's not just a metaphor. No, if you ever get into the weather, if you ever want to see a hurricane or a tornado, let me know.
Sounds exciting.
Yeah, I imagine pitch a Twister 2. That could work.
Pass.
Yeah.
I'll pass.
With a name like Fatal J, you're not allowed to pass on chasing things that are dangerous. You're
Everything but tornadoes and hurricanes, sir.
No, tornadoes are like the coolest thing. Like when you're standing out there and it's just planes and there's no trees or anything except for a thin wire connecting the telephone cord, and the wind is blowing right past it enough so that you just hear this faint whistling as a tornado sweeps by.
See, the thing is with a tornado or a hurricane, there's a lot of rain. He'd rather have the rain in the shower where he could hear himself sing. Can't quite do that in those big storms.
Good point.
Ryan,
yes.
We see here a picture of one of your Seventh Rule broadcasts. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how this project came to be?
Yeah.
And I want everybody, I'm going to put the link in the chat. I want everybody to go ahead and sub if you have not subbed to the Seventh Rule podcast.
Yeah. First of all, I'm glad you brought that screenshot up, because that's one of my favorite things, and one of my favorite memories, and one of the favorite things about the show is that we're always laughing and we're always having fun. And if you'll notice, you've got two Ferengi, a writer, and a dork all laughing at the same time. And that's pretty
cool. You guys
cool.
are always laughing. That's true.
It's a good feeling. They're good people. So how it came to be was Aaron Eisenberg had recently lost or left his previous podcast with Mr. Garrett Wong, who was Harry Kim on Voyager. And he wanted to do another one because Russ Hasledge of Odyssey Radio was encouraging him to keep it going. And Aaron loved it. He loved it so much. And, he and I discussed it in the past, not about starting a new one, but about how much he liked his previous one and wished it hadn't ended, and wished it weren't going to end, but it did. And he and I talked about he wanted to start a new one. And I said, yeah, I could possibly do that. It sounds fun, sounds great. I loved Aaron. We've worked together. I cast him in a few things too. And he was also just a friend, and he was always talking about, getting into business with me and be a business partner. We just kind of had to figure out how. He was really good about pinpointing talents in people. So, he always wanted to do a podcast or go into business in some way with me, or he would say that. And turned out he was right. It worked out beautifully, and he's a genius or a psychic or something. And what he needed was a second person. I was kind of like the host or the producer, the kind of the middleman. And, he threw out a few ideas. And then one day he calls me and he's like, dude, Sirach said yes. What do you think? And I was like, really? Sirach said yes, like Jake and Nog? And he said, yeah. I was like,
man, that's awesome.
I was like,
how great is that? Wow.
I can't imagine a more perfect fit. I was like, so at that point, how can I say no? I'm like, are you joking, Jake and Nog? That's absolutely perfect. And he said, what about the name, the Seventh Rule, like the Seventh Rule of Acquisition? And I was like,
man, look here.
Again, that's perfect, dude.
Everybody know, PJ know, every time I come on his stream, I'm representing the rules of acquisition. That changed my life financially. I'm serious, man. Man, look.
What's your favorite rule?
Okay, my favorite rule is this one. Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, here's my favorite rule. Once you have their money, you never give it back.
What's the seventh rule, Ryan?
Keep your ears open.
That's right.
Because as Aaron came up with that idea, it was because it was just going to be a podcast. Initially, it was just going to be audio, because Odyssey Radio is an audio format. And so keep your ears open was perfect. You know, it wasn't until after Aaron and myself and Sirach agreed to do it that I was like, you know, I'm pretty good with YouTube. I don't know if you guys can see it, but behind me over there is a plaque that I got from YouTube.
Oh, that's awesome.
Because one of my channels went over 100,000 subscribers. Now I think it's at 600,000 subscribers.
Dang.
So if you work at it long enough, eventually you kind of figure out, you know, all the search engine optimization, which is so boring.
What channel is that, Ryan?
It's called Falling Tower. And this is kind of a little tangent here, but Falling Tower was my first band with my friend, Mr. Michael Kenyon Rosenberg, who's also a guest of the show because he had peritoneal dialysis just like Aaron Eisenberg did. So he came on the show and talked to us about that. Anyway, very first band with Michael Rosenberg, and we had a lot of fun. It was called Falling Tower. And many, many, many years later, we kind of kept in touch. We started doing funny videos and screwing around, and before we even knew anything what we were doing. And lo and behold, eventually, if you do it long enough, you start to get a lot of subscribers and a lot of views. And we're actually doing a podcast too. It's a new one. We're going to be trying something out. It's going to be a lot of fun. So check that out. But anyway, so the final piece of the puzzle for the seventh rule was a man named Jared Cooper, who had helped them with their previous show. And he ended up being too busy with two other podcasts. So after the first 16 episodes or so, I think, you know, we parted ways with him. We still had him back on a couple times. You know, it was a fun and happy parting. So then we continued, Aaron and myself and Sirach, and it was just an absolute match made in heaven. Aaron is a psychic. It was perfect.
Ryan, let me tell you something, man. You was dropping some serious gems right now, because you said something that stood out, because I got YouTube buddies and I try to spread the message all the time. It's all about that search engine optimization,
right?
Especially if you're a small channel, you have to hit those low competition words, or guess what? YouTube is going to completely ignore you.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So you're a man that know your stuff, man. I'm listening to the stuff you're saying, and I'm actually writing it down, taking notes.
Thanks. It is a lot to learn, and like with anything else, anybody that does social media managing, I do that as well. Anybody that does that knows, as you guys probably know from doing what you're doing, that these algorithms always change. So no matter how much you think you know, you really don't know much. It's kind of the same thing with science and philosophy or anything else. You know, the more you know how much you don't actually know. Mm-hmm. So with search engine optimization, you learn a lot, but it's really just the basics. You know, it's like you get it, you understand it, but the rules and the algorithms and the formulae are always changing. So it's kind of torturous, but you're right. It seems like you've done your research a little bit ahead of time, because you kind of know what
it pays off, though. It pays off in the end. If you just stick to it, it pays off.
Theoretically. But
I wish I had the time to even think about trying that.
What I'm telling you, for me, it's been working.
Oh,
it's
great.
Been working it's been working for my channel.
What's your channel?
Fatal J.
Nice.
Fatal J. And I enjoy talking about that topic, but that topic is very low competition too, with the keywords. Mm-hmm. So I've just been sticking with it, been grinding, and it's been paying off.
So that's something you do on the side too, is you help a counselor or something for optimization of people's social reach?
Somewhat. I do social media managing, so I manage social media accounts for productions. Generally, I keep it sci-fi. Oh, there's my stray cat that I feed. Wondering why I'm not feeding her. She's a calico. She's adorable. Anyway, so mostly, you know, I stick with my niche, you know, like sci-fi. You know, I'm not like, if sometimes I'll do like game stuff, but really it's sci-fi productions or productions of my own stuff. Or, you know, there are a few, say, like actors, like Star Trek actors that can't always do their own social media, so they have somebody else do it for them. Things like that. So you do learn a lot by doing, as you guys know, the more you do it. And I think there's a lot of value in having a partner too. Like, for example, Aaron Eisenberg was a great partner. Great partner. He and I were always bouncing ideas off each other. With my new one, Falling Tower, Michael Kenyon Rosenberg, he was a great songwriting partner. He was a great lead guitarist. And, you know, he's been a great partner with the search engine optimization, because, you know, there's some things that you can do, but you'd rather not. And then there are other people that are like, oh yeah, I love doing stuff like that. And you're like, thank God. You know? And so Mike's really good at sometimes doing all these like little details, or going under the hood, as I call it. You go under the hood and you kind of tinker with these things. And so thank God for people like Michael Kenyon Rosenberg, because he really makes life easier on us.
So Ryan, do you still do the podcast with the Deep Space Nine cast?
Yeah, well, as you know, our friend Aaron left us back in September, but Sirach and I are still going strong with it. And we have guests often. You know, we've had people like Terry Farrell, we've had Armin Shimmerman, Robert Beltran, Nana Visitor, Tracy Coco. You know, we can go up and down the list. They've all been, you know, wonderful people.
And you guys just did 4K. Congrats.
Thank you. It's hard, man. When you have other channels that have like, you know, tens of thousands or hundreds, or you just see other podcasts that have like 1 million, and you're just struggling, as you know, like it's not really indicative of the quality. I mean, the show you guys have is a quality show, and you just know it's a struggle to get each and every one of those subscribers, and it's very slow and very bit by bit, and then one day it just blows up.
Yeah, and then I think like this with the big guys, it was a time when they was struggling, you know?
Right.
So I figure we all have to start somewhere. And you know what? Time goes by fast anyway. For you know it, a year, 2 years, 3 years go by, and then you the top dog on the mountain, you know?
I think one of my favorite quotes from all of like musical theaters from Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, where he just goes, anyone from anywhere can make it if they get a lucky break. And that stuck with me since I was little. So
right.
Hopefully.
But that lucky break is the tough part, you know what I mean? Because otherwise you're grinding and you're struggling for years or even decades. So the key is to just keep pushing, keep grinding, so that lucky break doesn't get wasted.
Yeah.
Ryan, is there still something in Hollywood that's on your bucket list?
Well, I've done, I mean, when I kind of fell into acting, you know, I didn't really have a bucket list because I was never planning on being an actor or a producer or anything. I never thought I would ever meet a Star Trek actor. I never thought I would be in a sci-fi film or anything. So I didn't really have I never thought I would be able to step on the Enterprise, you know. But if I did have a bucket list, that would be one.
Man,
another thing would be to be on Lord of the Rings and Star Wars. I didn't
You
get
a Tolkien fan too?
Come on. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I kind of like, you know, Tolkien maybe better than Star Trek.
Man, look here.
We have a real nerd here.
No, right here, Ryan. Man, you can be best buds because I'm a Tolkien hardcore fan. Are you ready for the Amazon?
Amazon, yeah. Are you a basketball fan though? Because if you are, then you're the trifecta with me.
Nah, I'm a baseball fan.
That's okay. They're cousins. They're cousins.
Oh man, that's awesome though.
Yeah. Oh, actually, I don't know if you can see it. Now you can't really see it, but I've got one of Gandalf's pipes back there. It's like a long
Nice.
Oh, really?
Gandalf pipe. Yeah, I can't read books. I just don't have the attention span for it. But
Yeah.
I read The Hobbit. I read all the Lord of the Rings multiple times. I read the Silmarillion, the Children of Hurin, all of it. So I mean, that guy figured out a way to capture my attention somehow.
And you know what I tell everybody, Ryan? Tolkien is the king of detail.
Right?
I mean, because if you look at one character, Tolkien traced back their whole family tree. You know, you can look at Aragorn and go back 15, 16, 17, 18 generations.
And he's got it all mapped out.
Yeah.
I think definitely George R.R. Martin took something out of that playbook for sure. Not just inspired by Tolkien, but the fact that he mapped out the entire world, all the characters, all of their lineage before you start writing. And so that way he can pull from anything. Because you're right, Tolkien, I mean, I got to confess, sometimes I would skip like a page because he spends a page or two in the book describing a fucking tree, man.
Yep.
I'm like, okay, I get it. I get tree. Let me scroll. Okay, tree. He's still talking about the tree. Okay, and song. Okay.
Man. He was
Super
amazing, man. That was an amazing man. That was an amazing author, man. Jeez Louise.
Yeah, my favorite.
I mean, the only thing that I think that can rival Tolkien writings is the Bible. You know what I mean?
It's so true.
There's a lot of research there too, I guess, right?
There
Yeah.
you go.
Do you know where Tolkien got his inspiration from? Because George R.R. Martin was inspired by Tolkien. Tolkien was inspired by Beowulf. That was his big inspiration there.
Huh.
Yeah. I can see that though. Because Beowulf been out for centuries.
Yeah, it's an old story.
I'm like almost like caveman type days. Beowulf.
One of the oldest literature we have.
Yeah.
Ryan, I have a picture here. Well, I have a video here in the background of the fifth passenger. Can you tell us, first of all, where we can find this to see? Because not everybody knows where to go ahead and find this. And can you tell us a little bit about what your role was in the production of this?
Or Moon, whatever that Moon movie was that I never saw, but I know Scott likes to mention that. Scott's a great guy, by the way. So is Morgan. Super cool people, still good friends of mine. And it's got a great cast. It's got Armin Shimmerman, David Lim from, I can't remember what it's called. Anyway, it's one of the new shows out that's supposedly great, but I haven't seen it. Tim Russ, Manu Intiraymi, Doug Jones, as I said, Marina Sirtis, myself, Rico E. Anderson, Darnell Davis, who played a Klingon in Star Trek VI, I believe, Hannah Hate, who was Molly O'Brien on Next Generation Deep Space Nine. So you can watch this online pretty much anywhere, Amazon, anything at all. You can get all that information at fifthpassenger.com, and it'll show you where you can find it, how you can watch it.
Sweet. I know what I'm doing in my isolation this weekend.
Yeah, it'll give you something to do for an hour and a half. But after that,
this looks good. Yeah. Is it more? Would you say it's more? Is it a suspense drama?
Right. It's a sci-fi thriller, kind of like the first Alien movie. Not so much like the second one. Yeah.
Cool.
Very cool. Very cool.
I'm very into that. I was watching the video as you were talking. I'm just like, yes, yep, I'm on board with this. Yep, okay, yep. Typing in the website, yep.
Yeah. Thanks. I think it's something that especially Morgan and Scott can be really proud of, because I know they were working on it and developing it for years before, we finally were able to make it happen. So, and they saw it through till the bitter end. You know what I mean? Like it's a lot of work, and it was an independent film that was really trying to compete with the big boys. And, if I were them, I mean, I co-produced it, I did my part, but really those two put in so much time and so much effort and pooled so many resources that it's something that honestly they should be proud of, like that they can hang their hat on for the rest of their lives. I'm really happy for them, because it turned out very well, honestly. I thought.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Now, I want to also ask you about this other project, which I'm gonna post right now. You connected us to Mark Zicree of Space Command,
Right.
and I think that's a fascinating project. And can you tell us, Brian, where is Mark in the development process for that? I know he's still fundraising. He's done some filming. Where is he? And are you involved in the behind the scenes or just as an actor?
Predominantly an actor. I've helped him with casting and a couple other things. Like Ferran Tahir, who was the villain in the first Iron Man movie. He was also Captain Rabaul in the 2009 J.J. Abrams movie, Star Trek. So that was really cool. I really liked him in that. He's a great actor, cool guy. So predominantly as an actor, actually that's where Doug Jones and I met, was on the set of the first Space Command. So what he's doing right now is working on pre-production for the 4th hour. This is like a series of hour-long episodes. The first one is shot and completed. The second 2 are shot and in post-production. And now he's working pre-production on the 4th one. And Mark Zicree, as you know, he wrote Far Beyond the Stars for Deep Space Nine, which is one of, or the best Deep Space Nine episode in a lot of people's estimation. He also wrote Next Generation's First Contact, not the movie, but the episode that I always thought was an underrated episode. He's written for Smurfs and He-Man and Babylon 5 and Sliders and all kinds of really cool stuff. So he's definitely a sci-fi junkie, and I hope you guys do end up getting him on your show, because he can tell you more stories about Twilight Zone and about Star Trek and about just kind of like the 60s through the 90s of all of sci-fi. You know, it's insane what he knows. He's like a sci-fi encyclopedia, that guy.
That is so
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it looks like we're going to interview him next week at some point. I think it's probably going to be Monday, so I will be posting. Yeah, thank you for connecting us, because he was on my bucket list for reaching out to him. Brian,
he'll be a great interview for you. He's loads of fun. He's got tons of stories. Really, you could just take a break and let him go, because he'll tell you anything you want to know. Just give him a subject and he'll go. It's a lot of fun.
Oh, cool.
Now, can you tell us a little bit about your character? What can you tell us about?
Yeah, I play Lieutenant Sturgeon. Mark named a lot of characters after his favorite writers, his favorite sci-fi writers of yesteryear. So I'm playing Lieutenant Sturgeon, who is, I don't remember the guy's name, John Sturgeon or Jimmy Sturgeon or something, one of his favorite writers from back in the day. And I'm sure if he sees this, he'll be upset with me because he said the name like 50 times. But so my character, I'm one of the good guys, kind of like, it's kind of like a Federation. So just imagine, a lieutenant in the Federation. It's that type of character. I'm more like the steady. I don't really get frazzled a lot, through the stress. I'm kind of like the Rock, where other people around me might be kind of, some get angry, some get desperate or sad or scared, and I'm kind of like the guy that just keeps things steady throughout. That's how I would describe my character. Very steady and solid, like a lieutenant should be, honestly.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Now, George, George Peter Gatsis is a 30-year veteran of the comic book industry, and what did you? Any opinions, George, or on what we may have seen from Space Command and what you've seen? Have you seen it?
Yes.
Artist wise, I mean.
And the Fifth Passenger. I admire your work, sir.
Oh, thank you. If you've seen Space Command, you've hardly, I definitely wasn't much in the first and second one. The third and fourth, a lot more, and further on. And Fifth Passenger, thank you for that. That's, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out.
Oh, totally. When I read the synopsis, I'm going like, oh, okay, they're surviving. Oh, an alien comes. Oh, I got to watch this. Wait a minute. What's this? and start.
No spoilers.
No spoilers. I start watching the movie blindly, and I'm going like, that guy and that person. I'm going like, oh my gosh. I start geeking out, going like, I know these people from other places. So it was a real surprise. It was just like the feeling I got was like walking into the variety store in the early 70s and seeing a big book called Superman versus the Amazing Spider-Man. I mean,
wow.
it was that kind of geek moment. And I admire your work, sir. One thing
Thank
I'm
you.
really curious is, are you? It sounds like everything right now is in a linear production with you. Have you thought about asymmetrical production, like toys, games, books? Just kind of like layering the work that you're producing and involved in.
That's tough because the more you spread your wings, the more you have to learn about that given field. And so as far as games, I've helped to run some Kickstarters for board games with my business partner, Frank Zanka, who's also a producer on Renegades and Cosmos. And he's a game developer, a board game developer specifically. I don't know anything about video games. Toys, that's not me either. I think, like I was saying earlier, creative types tend to be creative in a lot of ways, but we're definitely not creative in every way. Like, I'm a terrible artist. I'm so sad that I can't draw even a circle, and all these other people do it so easily. So
Circles are hard.
Oh no,
they
no.
are. It's hard to draw a perfect circle.
I have to stop you there. There is a Kickstarter campaign out there that's just on stick figures alone and made millions of dollars.
There we go.
And that's a creative person that was able to figure out that somebody would donate to that. I don't even know how that's possible, but they
All the
figured
people
it
who
out.
aren't artists donate.
Yeah. So I think a lot of it is knowing your limits and knowing not to stretch yourself too thin. Now, for example, somebody like my business partner, Frank Zanka, he's good at his specific realm, which is he's written some sci-fi books called Destiny Aurora. Check that out. Really cool stuff. And he expanded that into a board game. And he's also expanding that into comic books. So he's doing kind of the model that you're talking about, which is, expanding into different fields, but still kind of interconnecting them. So it's still relevant and you're still kind of working with what you know, if that makes sense.
Yes, makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with the comment section. That is a glorious poster. I've been just kind of like not blinking and just staring at it because it's so colorful.
Yeah, so to name the people in there, you'll see on the bottom left, that's Bill Mumy of Lost in Space. And he was also in an episode of Star Trek. He's kind of been all over the place. There's Doug Jones there, who we mentioned. There's James Hong next to him, who was in Big Trouble in Little China. He was Lopan, which is awesome. Bruce Boxleitner of Tron and Babylon 5, right? Mira Furlan of Babylon 5 as well. Michael Harney from Orange is the New Black. Robert Picardo. Ferran Tahir, our good buddies, playing Jack Kemmer, the lead at the top there. I think that's everybody. And Mira Furlan, by the way, she was also in Lost, right? We know her. So it's pretty star-studded there.
Yeah,
It is.
Which would explain why someone like me is not on that poster, because everybody else you can kind of recognize, and Mark, since he worked in sci-fi for so long, and he's met all these people and he's worked with them, and so when you do that, you kind of just call up your buddy and say, hey, I've got a new project, would you like to work on this?
yeah. Oh, that is cool.
Very exciting. Now, Ryan, when I'm watching Space Command, I'm seeing I'm getting this very surreal feeling from everything I'm seeing. Is that, now obviously that's intentional. What is it? What is the and the word that comes to me is surreal. It's like or hyper real. Can you
HD.
explain that feeling?
Right. First of all, I think I forgot to mention Ethan McDowell's name. He plays Jack Kemmer at the top there. It's Ethan McDowell. He's out in Georgia now, though. He moved away from LA, but he still flies in to do his role. So the style that Zachary does, and you can get more into detail with him when you get him on, but he's very focused on having a hopeful vision of the future, kind of like how in the 60s and 70s and 80s, when they're looking at the future of the world and science fiction and all that, it was always very hopeful. And nowadays, it's very doom and gloom. It's very negative. It's very dark and dreary. And so he's going back, and it seems as though he's kind of doing new science fiction through an optimistic lens and a retro style of the 50s. And so if you look at the designs of the ships and the colors and all that, the reason it feels surreal to us is because it's through the lens of, old school sci-fi, but with modern technology, if that makes sense. So it's really an interesting, delivery of these stories that he has.
Wow. Interesting. That was a very good explanation. I appreciate that.
Now he's going to come on and say something totally different. And no, I'm pretty sure he's going to say the same thing, but better.
Now I'm going to put up another image here, Ryan. And
I'm scared.
There's definitely a few things I need to ask you about, but I'm gonna say that for
those are the ones you need to be afraid of.
Yeah.
For legal reasons.
Yeah.
But first I want to ask you about this one. There's a few things on your YouTube channel which are really funny. Can you tell us about this character, Ryan?
Right. That is Admiral Varrick. And that was a independent Star Trek fan film by Tommy Kraft, who's up in Michigan, by the way, like a couple of you are, or one of you formerly. Tommy Kraft is a super amazing visual effects wizard. And he's the kind of guy where even if he heard me say that, he wouldn't blush because he'd be like, yeah, that's true. Really talented. I think he made this movie when he was like 23 years old, just out of his own basement. Now, my parts we shot down in San Diego during Comic-Con weekend because he was coming down. He brought his camera. We set up this green screen just in his friend's apartment. So everything I shot was in that apartment, as well as my friend Rico Anderson. He played a Vulcan. We did it all green screen. He rotoscoped it. It's really a cool thing where it's like the camera seems like it's going all the way around me at one point. Mm-hmm. But really what's happening is I'm just sitting on a desk chair, and my girlfriend at the time was ducking down and spinning the chair around. So it looked like the camera was moving, but it wasn't. Anyway, so the character is a Romulan admiral, and it was really cool getting to play a villain, getting to play a bad guy. This movie is really cool because many of us really liked Star Trek Enterprise and really were sad that it ended after 4 seasons. So what Tommy Kraft did was he wrote an Enterprise story that basically takes place right after season 4 ended, pretty much what season 5 would have covered, which was the war with the Romulans. And it doesn't take place on the Enterprise, but it takes place in that time during that conflict.
So what's the name of this project then?
That is Star Trek Horizon. And
okay.
You can see it on YouTube. Just type in Star Trek Horizon. I'm sure it is the most viewed Star Trek fan film in the history of the world. It's got like 10 million views or something ridiculous.
Dang.
Really good
I've
stuff.
seen this. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I've seen this, and I wanted to tell you that when I saw you doing this role, I thought you nailed it. I thought it was so well done. Thank
you. I did it in like 45 minutes in someone's apartment in San Diego. It was the weirdest thing. We spent more time having the makeup applied to me by the wonderful Lisa Hansel of Impact FX Makeup. She and her husband, Tim Vitito, are great with makeup. They design these prosthetics. They apply them. I've worked with them on Renegades, on just a ton of other projects, Blade of Honor, for example. And so she put the makeup on me for about an hour and a half, I think it was, while Tommy and his friend Dan were kind of setting up the apartment. So I was just stuck in the kitchen while she's doing that. And then while I was shooting my part, then she was putting the makeup on my friend Rico, who ended up being a Vulcan at the time. So he just knocked us both out in one afternoon, and every single other part of the movie was shot up in Michigan in his basement.
Awesome.
Wow.
I think he even made the clothes himself. He just taught himself how to make the wardrobe.
That's impressive.
It's shocking.
That looks great. Yeah.
Yeah, that is high quality cosplay. You walk out on the floor like, mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, Adega or George, did you have another question for Ryan?
Yeah. I'm really curious. Which one of the? I'm not asking for angst or ill will or anything like that. But which one of the productions was the most challenging, and which one of the productions that you've been involved in has been the least hassle?
Okay, that's a good question. Let me think. They've all had their challenges, some definitely less than others. There was one I did with most of the team from Renegades called Cosmos. And what that was basically like Cheers in space. So if you imagine there's a bar on an asteroid, and then it's just all the aliens of the galaxy are stopping by. It's like a little place for pit stops, Great idea. It was a ton of fun. And we had Ethan Phillips, who played Neelix. He played Cosmo, which was like a 4-tentacled bartender. We had Drake Bell of Drake and Josh in there. We had Claudia Christian and a multitude of others. Bob Picardo was in that as well. Bob Picardo, he's an amazing actor. God, he can do anything. So I love working with him. And the challenges there, and there were many, at least half of those challenges came from the studio, the stages that we had rented, because it just kept having problems. Like their air conditioner just broke, and this was the middle of summer in the San Fernando Valley, where it gets to be 105, 110, 115, plus the lights, plus the costumes and prosthetics and alien masks and stuff. That was very difficult. We had a lot of problems because of that air conditioning situation. And there were other things with the stages too. I won't name the stages, which is too bad, because it has a fun story attached to it. I'll tell you guys off the air maybe, but I don't want to bring anybody down. They probably already brought themselves down. They're probably out of business by now, but that one had a lot of stress attached. And I remember at one point my business partner, Frank, who was producing it, and I was co-producing or associate producing, and the people that ran the stages, there came a point where he's just like, I'm not talking to these people anymore. They like you better. I'm out of this. Meanwhile, I'm trying to talk with them. And, it's good to know, like I was saying earlier, know your limits. Sometimes when you're working on certain things, people just have it out for one specific person. Sometimes it's kind of like if you've ever worked in the restaurant industry and somebody's complaining to you as their waiter, oh, this is wrong. And they're being like a total jerk. And then you bring in another waiter or the manager, and they're totally nice to that person. It's not because the other waiter or the manager were some amazing thing. It's just because sometimes they just want a fresh face and they just want to start over, and that works with productions as well. Sometimes they're just tired of seeing the same person. You just need to bring somebody else new in to talk with them. So let me think about the most fulfilling one. Fifth Passenger, as I mentioned, was kind of like the little engine that could. I think that one was very fulfilling because it was quite a hill that we climbed together. That was definitely a major undertaking that went pretty well. The Seventh Rule podcast that I'm doing right now, honestly, it's been very fulfilling. Aaron brought in such a nice community of friends, so Aaron's friends, Sirach's friends, my friends, we all kind of came together. And, Aaron touched a lot of lives before being on that podcast. He touched a lot of lives. He made a lot of friends. As a person and as an actor, his role of Nog touched a lot of lives, and it really brought together a really nice and supportive community. So that actually might be the most fulfilling production and the most rewarding so far, I would say.
Let me ask you a question, Ryan, about your podcast. You guys pre-record it, correct?
Right.
Okay. Now, do you ever take, because I haven't seen you guys do it yet, do you guys ever take like questions from the chat?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Now we do that during the live chat of when it's pre-recorded. Now we've only done like maybe 2 full live shows. We're probably going to be doing that more. It's just a little tougher because Sirach, our buddy Sirach Lofton, he's not very good friends with technology. so yeah, we'll see. A lot of it might have to be the 2 of us in the same room, and we live kind of far. I mean, maybe only 15 miles apart, but in LA, that's a lifetime away, honestly, in Los Angeles. So live videos, I definitely think there's a big future for us in live videos, but we'll see how it goes.
Since we have you on, let me ask you this question: How much of Sirach is in Jake Sisko, would you say?
It's interesting. Now, this was a role he did 25 years ago, so he was definitely, he was a kid, he was a teenager. When I watch old episodes, I see some of his mannerisms. I feel personally like he's changed a ton, like he's changed light years from who he was at that time. I see very little of Sirach in Jake Sisko as currently, constituted. But Sirach as a 15-year-old probably had very much to do with who Jake Sisko was as the character. But I didn't know him then. I only met him maybe 5 years ago. So I've never known the Sirach that reminds me of Jake Sisko. I only know the Sirach that's a cool dude,
I'm sorry. I have some things going on at home. Ryan, you're awesome. The few minutes we've been here and listen. No, I mean it, because I read people sometimes pretty well, and listening to your confidence and the programs that you're doing. Definitely going to be a big follower, but I have to run. I hope you guys have a good rest of the program.
Thanks very much. I appreciate the nice words.
Thanks, Adega. Be safe.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now I have to. George is going to love this. George, Ryan has a great comedic component to certain things he's done. So I gotta say, I've seen some of the stuff on your YouTube channel. I think it's freaking hilarious.
Yeah. So what that was one time back in the day, I did like a Bear Grylls impression. If you know Bear Grylls of Man vs. Wild, and people thought it was funny, and so we just kind of made like a series of videos of me being Brick Snarls. It was like a Bear Grylls parody video.
Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh!
So yeah, there it is. It was actually, I will say, I was like pretending to be a survival expert with, as you saw, with our super producer and our equipment tech, and they were not a producer or an equipment tech, but they're just it was kind of like a fake parody reality show. I don't know what it was, but it was a ton of fun. Now, my friend Stan Ballizer has a cabin up in the Idlewild Mountains, which is like 2 hours east of LA. So there's snow there, so we could go play in the snow. And I believe what that was called was taking a snow shower. So I was pretending like you can, because Brick Snarls is always like, Bear Grylls is always like, drinking water out of cow shit or doing all kinds of silly stuff. So what I was doing is like ridiculous things like, oh yeah, it's no problem. You can just use snow for soap and you can take a snow bath or whatever, and then I'm washing myself with pieces of snow. And I'm doing my terrible British accent, and it was actually a ton of fun, honestly. And we would, shoot an episode in like an hour.
Yeah, you were really funny in this. I have to ask you. I can't find it right now, but I thought your yellow snow bit was really funny. Did you actually eat the yellow snow?
Yeah, I ate yellow snow, but you can make snow yellow without peeing on it.
It was apple juice. It was apple juice. Let's just leave that in our minds, okay? It was apple juice.
Yeah, just the point of that show was just doing insane but mostly stupid things. Like kind of like, why is the guy in the snow not wearing a shirt when he's a survival expert? Because I think the first thing that you'd want to do to survive in the snow is wear a shirt. So I thought they would be funny that he's just never, I think I even made a joke one time where I found like a sweater. And I'm like, oh, this is really great because you could build a shelter out of this sweater. Or, like the guy is just like brainless and just didn't get it. So it's a lot of fun.
I'm like kind of mentally thinking, how well would snow work as like a cleaning product? Because if you get a certain type of dendrite and a certain kind of flake, that could work actually.
See, you know more than I do already, so who knows?
So I watched a bunch of those, and I thought that you have a really interesting comedic component to your talent, Ryan. That's something in your arsenal there.
Thank you. It was all improvised. I mean, I'd just have an idea and I'd say, okay, hit record. And we would just improvise the whole thing because like those shows, they are basically improvised and then they kind of edit around it. So some people have a talent for writing funny things or plan out funny things. And some people are better at improvisation, but aren't as good at, delivering. So like stand-up comedians, for example, kind of the opposite of what I'm doing, which is they prepare material that's really funny, in theory. And sometimes I find that to be a lot harder to do because who knows what's going to be funny and what works. That's why stand-up comedians live such difficult lives because they write something and they're like, oh, this is gold. And then they test it out and nobody laughs. And then they say, well, maybe I'll try it again at this other club. And everybody laughs. And they're like, well, what gives? I don't get it, So improvisation, if you're lucky, it works well. Prepared comedic material, like my friend Michael Kenyon Rosenberg of Falling Tower. A lot of respect for comedians. They live a very difficult life because of that aspect of things. But thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, the fact that you can fall flat on your face at any moment or be successful, and it's a very fine line between both is just, I totally agree. That is very hard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're successful if you do fall flat on your face.
Yeah.
People love that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. Ryan, if you ever were cast on the Orville, what would be an ideal role for you on the Orville?
Great question. Let me think.
And by the way, are you? I know we talked about it before. You've seen all of season 1 and 2. Like you're very into it.
Absolutely. And I like it a lot. I think it's great. I love the characters. Like I said before, I was initially a little bit worried. I was hoping it would work out well, and it did. And I did become attached to the characters, and I do like all of it, honestly. Mm-hmm. So what kind of character would I like to be? Maybe a villain. playing a villain is always fun.
Ooh.
But if you're a villain, you're usually a one-off. If you're really good, then they bring you back a second or third time. So being part of the crew is generally more ideal if you want job security. Whereas if you're a villain, you're kind of in and out.
Now, do you prefer, like, if you were to have a non-villain role, like a good guy role versus a villain role, and they were of equal quality, which one would you lean for?
Villains are more fun.
Yeah.
Always more fun. In fact, when I very first started acting and I was watching Deep Space Nine, and I was just like blown away by Mark Alimo playing Ducat.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, man, that is so good. It's so awesome. What a great actor. It must be so fun to play villains in movies. And I realized, I was like, wait, hang on a second. I can do that now. I'm acting now. So it just kind of like, it was like this epiphany where I was like, wait a second, I actually can do this. And so I kind of modeled myself a little bit after Mark Alimo, because I learned his mannerisms and I figured out what made him so good. And I actually met him on a set one day. I was working on some little indie thing, and the owner of the house, while I was learning my lines, he's mentioned three-dimensional chess, and I was like, oh yeah, I've got one of those. It's a Star Trek thing. And he's like, do you like Star Trek? I said, yeah. He's like, one of my buddies worked on Star Trek. And I said, who? And he says, Mark. And I said, Alimo? I like almost killed myself. And he's like, yeah. He's like, he lives like a mile down the street. I could call him over if you want. And of course, I'm like, no, it's cool. But he did. And Mark, being the gracious man that he is, he came over in 5 minutes. He had paint all over himself. He was painting his kitchen. He took an hour away from his day just to come and meet a fan and give me words of advice and play cards with me and taught me some things. And he was a really good guy. And I really appreciated that. So,
oh my God.
Wow. Villains are good people. Is the
point. Aw, that is such an awesome story. I always love, like, some people say never meet your heroes, and then you meet other people who say always meet your heroes, although they're farther and fewer between. But I've found that in the sci-fi community in particular, everyone that I've met has just been a gem of a person.
I think that most people will echo your sentiments. I know I will. With very few exceptions, I've only been surprised at how pleasant and wonderful and loving and caring and friendly Star Trek actors are and sci-fi actors are. Again, with very few exceptions. And I mean, like Mark was one, Walter's one, Tim Russ is a wonderful human, Robert Picardo, Armin Shimmerman. I mean, these are all people that, like, they're not just good people, but it's like they're better people than I am. I'm just like, wow, you're such a good person, and I've often wondered, there's like this weird thing that I've tried to figure out, which is, does Star Trek only hire and cast good people?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or does Star Trek, working on Star Trek and getting the support from the fan community, make these actors better people?
Yes.
It might be. It's probably both, to be honest.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah. I won my first ever convention that I ever went to was a full-on Star Trek convention in Chicago, and of course, being the awkward college kid I was, I didn't know any con etiquette or anything, and I mean, everyone, even from the actors to the community, is just so accepting and understanding. And I think that's such a breath of fresh air nowadays.
Absolutely. I haven't really met a Star Trek actor that wasn't at least cordial. You know what I mean? Like, even a couple of them that have a bad rap here or there, I haven't seen it. Like, in person, I have not seen it after seeing them multiple times. So I think sometimes people just get a bad rap because they had a bad day, or maybe the person giving them a bad rap just sucks as a person. Sometimes it could be on them too. We have to understand that, maybe if you're being a jerk to somebody, they're going to be a jerk back, and then you shouldn't go on social media and be like, hey, that guy was a jerk to me,
Yeah.
I've found them overwhelmingly to be good people.
Yeah.
Any thoughts or any? What are your perspectives on Gene Roddenberry, Ryan?
Well,
and his vision of what he
right.
wanted to.
Well, when Gene and I used to have lunch every day, I'm just kidding. I've never met him, sadly. He seems like a great guy, or used to be. My impression of him was, I think that people pretty much have a good idea, good understanding of who he was. Warts and all, he created a universe that really resonated with us. He had his foibles, like we all do. And I think those foibles, I don't want to say that those foibles of his are forgivable because they're acceptable things, but because if any of us were held under a microscope, people would find issue with some of the things in our lives or in our past. But above all, he seemed like he was a person that had a joy of life, who was obviously very creative, who had a hopeful vision of the future, and who really, he wanted to create something good. And I don't mean good as in of high quality, but something that made people feel good and that made people think that, we have a good future ahead of us, that we're going to figure it out. It's not going to be an immediate thing. It's going to be a step-by-step process in which we adjust here, we improve there, we fix this, we fix that, and eventually we're going to get there. We're going to be heightened beings or whatever. We're going to be flying through the stars. We're still going to be imperfect, but we're going to be better than we were. Just kind of like how now we're better than we were, obviously, 400 years ago. And I think he recognized that and wanted to show us that, hey, hang in there. We're getting there slowly. We're getting better, and eventually we'll figure it out.
Yeah. I liked your answer.
Thanks.
Let me ask you one more thing about Seth MacFarlane and the Orville. A lot of people, so we know that Seth has brought a lot of his expertise from animation to the project,
right.
And as with like different from other kinds of sci-fi shows, when the Orville sits down is ready to film. Well, when they're ready to film, every script has been fine-tuned and polished and repolished, and they're all ready to go. And that work ethic from animation is brought into the sci-fi realm, where we haven't seen this before, because usually on a sci-fi show, people might be writing episode 5 while they're filming episode 2, but this is all done before the filming season even starts. Any thoughts on Seth bringing all that animation expertise to science fiction?
In a word, no. In more words, not really. I don't know, because I don't know much about animation. To be perfectly honest, I don't know much about it. I understand that the writing and the beats that he has to take are probably very different when it comes, because in animation it seems like it's quick hits, it's sight gags, it's things like that. It's a different understanding of the visual medium. So it might not always translate, but Seth obviously is able to do that. I don't know if that's him in particular, or if he just surrounded himself with writers that he trusts that can do that. I suspect it's both. He seems like he knows what he's doing. As far as the whole production aspect, I don't know too much about animation or what how that would translate. I know that there's so much more to do in real life stuff than in animation, because there's just if nothing else, there's background actors, there's grips and gaffers, and doing the lighting, there's cameramen, there's just this huge group of production people that you're hiring, and you're renting all these facilities and all these props and production design. So there's a lot more to it. I think it doesn't necessarily take longer to do real life stuff than animation, because animation, as you know, takes forever to do. It's extremely tedious. It's extremely difficult. to do. So they're definitely two completely different beasts, I think.
What since we got you on the Orville topic, I'm just going to put you on the spot. What are some of your favorite characters, or who's your favorite character on the Orville? If you have one, or if you had
I really like Lieutenant Dan. That guy kills me, right? The dude in the elevator, and I think, I don't know if they sometimes they bring somebody for a one-off, for one scene or one episode, and they're just like so funny and so good that they have to bring them back. I think that may have been the case with Dan. I think they're just like, this guy's way too funny, and so now he's been in maybe like 4 episodes or something like that. I mean, he might be my favorite, which is ridiculous to say,
really?
but
That's great.
I mean,
awesome.
because of his delivery, his comedic timing, he's really good, really funny. I mean, we saw Patrick Warburton playing, I can't remember the character's name, but the guy with the trunk, he was obviously great, because we know Patrick Warburton is super talented. Of the main cast, I mean, I'm enjoying all of them for different reasons. I don't really have a favorite out of them. I do really enjoy when Gordon messes with what's his name, the robot
Isaac.
fellow, Isaac. Sorry, I haven't watched Orville in like a year, so I'm like forgetting everybody's names. But those two, like when he's cutting off his leg and he's like, "Oh, I gotcha," even though the leg was like way longer than what he actually cut off. But I think, if I were to say my favorite character is just kind of the writing, like I really just enjoy that they understand the humor between characters. I think we all love to hate Clyden the most. I think we can all agree with that. Clyden is the Keiko O'Brien of the Orville, right? or Kai Wynn or something. Right? He's just right. He's just you can just interchange those two, no problem.
That's funny.
I like them all, honestly.
Yeah, you'd be hard pressed to find a person who has a least favorite character, and for like a vehemently least favorite character, because they're so well rounded. I love that they're taking the time to actually talk out the characters and show their history and show their background. It shows the amount of thought that goes into it. And I think it probably would just make playing the character even easier.
Sure. Yeah, the more they have a character fleshed out, the easier it is for the actor to really grasp that character and where they're going with it. And I've been on productions where my character didn't have much to work with. And so I'm just kind of grasping at straws. I'm like, how do I make this character interesting if there isn't much on the page? And I think, kind of going off on a tangent, but I think that's what makes commercial actors so brilliant, is you'll notice sometimes that there's a commercial and an actor has one line on that commercial, but they made that line interesting or catchy or unique. And you're like, now I know how that actor got that role, because they said that line in a different and unique way that they hadn't thought of and that nobody else had thought of, and they got that. But bringing it back to the Orville, they don't really have to worry about that because it's mostly on the page. They know what they're doing, and they are hiring people with good comedic chops, that can get funny writing and make it even better.
Ryan, I just wanted to introduce you to one of our panelists who comes in here every once in a while, Drew from Bounding into Comics. I just wanted you guys to meet because Ryan's Seventh Rule podcast is something that can be featured on Bounding every once in a while. If you guys,
nice. That's
cool.
I just wanted you guys just to connect before we wrap this up.
I feel like I've seen that, Bounding into Comics. Yeah.
We're a pop culture website. We cover obviously comics and movies, television. What's going on around the industries. I'm also I wear many hats. I'm also the staff video game writer. So
nice.
I've been a gamer all my life, man. So that part of it's like that's the really fun part of the job for me. So
yeah, I've definitely seen your website before, people sharing stuff, and I've definitely seen it around.
Yeah, and I myself, I do a podcast here on YouTube as well on my channel. I do. We're doing a Battlestar Galactica podcast. I call it the Pegasus Actual Podcast, and we do. We're right now doing a retro review through the seasons of BSG, the 2004 show. So
I was going to ask you if it was the reboot or the original.
Yeah, the reboot is so compelling, man, Ryan. It's just such good storytelling. You know, how they could have had more seasons out of it even than 4. You know,
Sure.
And it's actually a joy going back and rewatching it. To, you know, when you see something with that much good storytelling in it, that the characters having so much depth, just the complexities in it. When you go back, you can appreciate that after you go back on a rewatch, and you're trying to catch the little nuances when you're going to do a review and talk about it in that way. And it's oh man, I'm having a blast right now with it.
Yeah, we were talking about writers that really flesh out their characters and their mythology and lore, and Ronald D. Moore is one of those people that clearly really thought about this show before he created it. He really put in a lot of thought into the mythology and the lore of his world.
They have such a good writers room on that show too. I mean, you know, good God, Thompson and Weddle, and you had oh God, I'm trying to think of the some of the other people they had. I know they had Mark Verheiden, some other good people behind the scenes. Man, they just had good people across the board behind the scenes. And you could tell in the quality of the episodes, because even the episodes you would consider like some of the weaker ones, they still have good continuity and hold up.
Yeah, I didn't know much about their writers' room there. I just knew that Ronald D. Moore was their showrunner, and he also worked on Deep Space Nine, as we all know. And a lot of people are clamoring for him to come back to the Star Trek world and write one of the next series, like maybe the Section 31 upcoming series.
Yeah, I would. I'll tell you what, Ryan. I'm in agreement with those folks. You know,
Me too.
I've watched Discovery. I've watched Picard now, and yeah, there's just something in the new Trek that's lacking a little bit. You know, and I feel like the storytelling is really off, and someone coming in with a good, rich knowledge of Star Trek past and even the recent past would do so much just to help this, because it seems to me like the folks in charge of the new one, they're not really. I don't know. They're not really tapping into what they could to really bring that across and bring the wider base of Star Trek fans back.
I think oh, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt.
No, please go ahead.
Oh well, we were talking earlier how sci-fi has taken a turn from utopia to dystopia, right. And I think once you hit right around 2001 with Enterprise, that's when you start to see that change from utopia to dystopia, and then that gap, and now to where we are with Discovery and Picard. I think you can visualize that transition, not only in like the storytelling, but in the colors too. Originally, the series was super bright, and now it's kind of muted.
Well, I was going to say, Katie, I know Stargate Universe and Battlestar Galactica. Well, Battlestar Galactica was the big one because Ronald D. Moore's universe, it was very real. It was very gritty. And there were a number of franchises that tried to follow with that sort of setting, that sort of really raw depiction after. And the problem with that was it just didn't catch on. There was a certain like just magic about BST that caught on. Everything made sense. And it's like Ryan alluded to, Ronald D. Moore had careful planning. He laid everything out ahead of time. And you can see it because I have the actual show Bible. I've got a buddy of mine that works in the industry, and he sent me the show Bible. And you can see just reading the show Bible what the meticulous way that they went about it. And then when Stargate Universe didn't really, I think, hit that to a degree, but they were a major franchise. They did it, and then it sort of started a trickle down effect to where, like you were talking about, Katie, a lot of people started to, sort of jump on that formula afterwards. And it's just like, it really hasn't come to fruition since.
Let me
take it off.
Drew, let me because we've had Ryan on for quite a bit, and
gosh, yeah.
Ryan, I just wanted to let you know that obviously you hadn't caught us at our best moment, particularly me, because I've been traveling in Europe and this is all.
You've got it rough right now, man.
Yeah, he's stuck.
I want to thank you because you have made it so very easy, Ryan, and it was such a pleasure to have this interview with you. And I would love to have you back anytime. You are welcome always. And I just wanted to thank you for joining us. Thank you so much, Ryan.
Well, thank you. You've made it really easy on me too. And I'm happy to come back anytime. We have much more to discuss. Like next time I'll ask Drew if he could pinpoint what it is he thinks the new Star Trek writing is lacking. Don't answer it now. I want to hear it next time.
Yeah.
No.
We're leaving,
I feel like that's a whole
on a
conversation right there.
Yeah. I'm down for that, Ryan. Anytime, brother.
Sounds good.
So I want to, Ryan, is there anything else? Is there anything you want to plug or anything you want to add to before we wrap up?
No, I think we hit all the beats. I appreciate you mentioning the seventh rule. I appreciate you mentioning Fifth Passenger, and giving me the opportunity to mention Falling Tower. And I noticed you put that at the bottom there when I was talking about it. Everything else, I think, is just, guys, we're going to have to, we got a lot to wait out right now. There's some crazy stuff happening in the world. Mm-hmm. So I think one of the things we can do, there are a lot of things we have to do, but one of the things we can do, obviously, is to start being creative with the way we communicate. Things like this. Watch podcasts, create your own podcast, support people's podcasts. We're very fortunate right now that something like this didn't happen 40 years ago or 30 or even 15 years ago. We have internet, we have cell phones, we have social media, we have microphones. We have, you know what I mean? Like we have laptops, we have infinite flavors of LaCroix, or some people would say flavorless.
That's the best one you've listed. Better than an internet.
So, I mean, we're just lucky that it's happening now. I mean, it's a horrible thing what's going on with this coronavirus mess, and who knows what's going to come of it. But the good news is that we are better equipped to handle it person by person. Like if somebody said you had to stay home for a month, as long as you had food and you had your utilities, dude, you can still talk to your parents. You can still communicate. You can still keep up. You can still hang out with all of your friends. You can hang out with your friends like this for their birthday and have a virtual party. Sounds lame, kind of, but we could do it in theory.
Yeah. I actually did that, man.
I did that too. I had dinner with my parents last night. I set up my phone. They put me on the usual spot in the dinner table. And we had dinner together.
I'm sorry that I called that lame. It must have been fun. And I'm just kidding. But I think that we just need to be creative and realize how lucky we are that we have, the means to get through this, at least as far as entertaining ourselves and being creative and still being able to create things and work. I mean, you can still figure out ways to work from home oftentimes. You can still write that book, or you could read that book that you've been meaning to read, or you can plant your vegetables that you've been meaning to plant, or
you can make a TARDIS out of a box and scrap wood.
See?
Oh yeah. Perfect. Katie, show us the TARDIS real quick.
So this is just like a $3 wooden box I got at Michael's and some scrap pieces, and I just kind of printed it out. And you open it up, and it's a jewelry box.
Wow.
You pay the tenant.
Oh, that's dope.
I
like
have
it.
no life. I'm trying to finish off the little top part now, but
Oh,
yeah,
that's amazing.
it's been about a week, but I'm proud of this little thing.
That's awesome. Very creative.
I'm running out of
Ryan,
projects,
we'll
though.
we'll let you go. Thank you so much. And like I said, you're always welcome back. Let us know how to support you for your project for the Seventh Rule or any other project you're working on, and we'll be in touch.
Yeah,
Thanks so much.
Ryan, I was going to ask you super quick. Do you have a Twitter I can hit you up?
Yeah, incredible_Husk, or you can just type in my name, Ryan T Husk. I mean, you can really put my name, Ryan T Husk, into any kind of social media, or even just Google, and it'll show you, ways to find me. It's usually pretty easy.
Awesome. We'll talk, brother. Thank you so much. Nice.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
And before you go, Ryan, I like if it's possible, I'd like to email you a download link to my book. It's a humor book, and it makes parody off of Star Trek.
Cool.
I think you might like it. It's a graphic novel.
Thanks.
Some good reading for isolation.
I could learn a little bit about humor, I hear. So thank you.
So if you put your email in the private chat on the streams, I'll be able to send it to you.
I sure will. I'll do it right now.
Awesome.
Okay, guys. Dennis, Delphine, Supreme Heretic, Alaric, Adega, Captain Spire, everybody who's joined us. Thank you so much, Orville Nation. And you guys be safe and have a great weekend. Thank you, guys. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Peace.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ryan.